I remember it being a very typical day, so typical and dull that the details of what happened previous to the incident completely slipped my mind. It was around 2:30 a.m. to 3 a.m., and I was walking home. The sun wasn't up yet, and the stars were blocked out by gray clouds swirling above me in the sky. I recall walking down the street, the damp asphalt beneath my feet. The air was wet, humid, and had a metallic taste to it. I could smell a storm coming on. Then, sure enough, it started to rain. The lamppost lights were dim. I couldn't see very well in the dark, so I decided I would take the subway to get home, and to avoid getting completely soaked down to bone. As I walked that early morning, I saw no one. The occasional car passed by every 5 minutes or so, but other than that, it was lifeless. Who would want to be in such weather at this time of day? No one but me, the foolish young woman that so picked a night job, of course. As I went down the stairway to the underground metro station that was nearest, I noticed it was deserted. I felt out of place and slightly disturbed in a way. The long white tiled hall that led to the main underground area was empty. Nothing but echoes and a certain humming to accompany my footsteps could be heard. I paid for a ticket at the booth and went through the machine to go sit on an empty bench near the tracks. I waited patiently in silence. There were no trains there. Worst of all, there were absolutely no other people there besides myself. Never had I felt so alone in my entire life. The neon lights on the walls flickered in a big empty space. I could see small insects flying and bumping into each other multiple times ignorantly. I crossed my ankles and bit my lip, staring up at the many pipes sticking out of the ceiling above. I waited for one of the trains to come by, any of them, any at all, but none ever did. It has been so long that I lost count of minutes. After a while, something caught my eye, a small blinking red light at the end of the station. I got up and walked over and narrowed my glare, attempting to find out what indicated it. After getting a bit closer, I noticed it stated that this station was closed due to repairs. I thought, why not lock the entrances then? Would have saved me a lot of this wasted time. But that's when I remembered that there were no doors to lock. The area was open to public at all times. Also, the machines worked, so it didn't seem that it would be closed. Anyone could have just come in and make the same mistake I just did. But I didn't see anyone else, so I felt a little embarrassed. I sighed and told myself that walking in the rain would have to do, turning on my heels and heading to the next exit once again. As I was leaving, I heard a sudden booming sound before seeing nothing but darkness. The shock of the moment got me, and I jumped up a little, clutching my chest with one hand. I was startled and confused as I was going on. I widened my eyes and noticed that the lights had been turned off. Could there have been an automatic switch that flipped off at a certain preset time? In any case, this wasn't practical. Not one bit. I took a deep breath, knowing I would have to find a way out somehow. It's just one of those challenges life faces you to see if you can manage. You have to just get out of it. It's like a test in a way. I called out, "Hello?" once or twice, but was left with no answer. So I finally decided to get a move on and head out there. But there were tracks nearby, and I didn't want to fall and, by mistake, around blindly in the dark. I thought this was for a while before deciding to get on all fours and feel where I was on my hands, so I didn't want to bump into anything. I started crawling around the dusty ground. I searched for a wall, desperate to try and reach the light switch of some sort. In one moment that felt like eternity, I literally felt like I was nowhere, like I wasn't part of the world anymore. It was all so surreal. The feeling just wasn't quite right. I couldn't see, of course, so I focused on listening to what was around me to get an idea where I was. There was a constant dripping, myself breathing quietly, loudly in panic. Metal pipes creaking and the blinking red light in the distance. Those were the things I noticed the most. I wanted to be back in my warmly lit apartment, telling myself that I made it and everything was okay. But sadly, you have to get through the problematic situation before that. Imagine being out of there made of things even worse in a sense. Because I really didn't even feel like I would ever get out of there. I felt trapped and lost in an unknown place. My hands intensively scanned the floor, practically sweeping it clean. My fingers then felt a hard wall in front of me. I couldn't help but exhale quietly in relief. I spread my arms widely on the rough surface to find a switch. Sadly, there was nothing of the sort. There must have been the switches in a control room or something. I hit the wall with my fist in anger and major disappointment. That's when the strangest thing happened. A few seconds later, after my punch was heard, another one sounded through the station, a bit louder than mine had been. I stood dead in my tracks and took a gulp before hesitantly turning around. I couldn't see anything but a little red light blinking. It was the only thing still on, proving to me that I had not lost my vision. I figured it must have been an echo from the punch that sounded, and I ignored it and shook my head. I walked along the wall quickly, trying to find a door or something else. There was sure to be a switch in the storage closet, so I followed the wall, tapping on every wall to make sure I didn't miss anything. That's when my knees hit something hard, probably a bench. I decided to sit down for a bit and calm down. There must have been something else I could do, but I didn't know what to think anymore. It must have been 3:45 a.m. by now. I tried to comfort myself, thinking that the sun would come up in a while. Then I realized I was underground, so I wouldn't even be able to see the light, even if there was one. That thought was a total letdown. I sat there for a bit wondering what to do, which would be the best course of action to take. I thought about it for a few seconds before a certain feeling tugged at my throat. It was as though I was being watched. Quite closely, though. I was too afraid to move or even breathe. I hadn't thought about it, but what if something really was out there in the dark? I held my breath and looked around, still unable to see anything but the little blinking light. I couldn't hear anything but the regular eeriness of the place. Other than that, everything seemed quiet, but the feeling wouldn't leave me alone. If anything, it was growing stronger by the second. I looked to my left and then the edge of my seat, leaning forward. The bench on my side was all shaky from my trembling. Then I realized it was strange that the other side of the bench wasn't. So I looked slowly to my right. That's when I saw it. There's no other way to describe it than horrific. That is not even close to pinpoint it well enough. It's one of those things you have to take your breath away, and not in a good way, or make your heart stop beating for the second you lock eyes with it. It was a pitch black silhouette, darker than dark, as if it never seen the light. Even though we were already in darkness, I could tell. That's how I'd identify it. And that wasn't the worst part. What made me feel paralyzed with fear, those utterly morphing eyes. They were a bright shade of yellow and wide open, brighter than any car, but small and perfectly round. They would hauntedly glow as it stared at me without making a peep or any movement whatsoever. It wouldn't even blink. It couldn't have been human, no doubt. It was something else entirely. I tried to tell myself it wasn't real. I tried to convince myself it was a reflection of some sort. But what reflection? We were in the dark already. There was no source of light to reflect. A million questions swarmed through my mind in a second. What did it want? Had it been watching me this whole time? Was it an animal? Why wasn't it moving? I looked away in disbelief, then looked soon back, more afraid than ever. I found it had silently moved and was now a head's length away from my own, still staring at me in complete silence. I jumped back and ran. I ran for my life, ignoring everything around me, the sounds, the posts, the tracks, all of it. Nothing was important anymore. Nothing mattered till getting out of there alive. As I ran, I heard banging on the walls, as if something was trying to get my attention, but I wouldn't dare to look back. I located where I was by positioning myself in my mind, seeing where the red light was, and making a mental path for the exit, which I could have done in the first place. It just only occurred to me. I ran down the empty hallway as the banging got louder and louder behind me, then slower and slower before ceasing. I was terrified, no other feeling. As I get closer to the exit, stumbling on the stairs, I heard a deathly shriek, so high-pitched and loud that I had to cover my ears to keep going. I got it in my head, and I can only say I'll never forget it. That was the proof to me that was definitely not human. It sounded like a cross between a dying rabbit and a hawk's screech, but it was much longer and somehow different. I finally reached the surface after a few minutes as the sun began to rise. I cried with the relief and fell to the ground exhausted. I was so happy to be out of there. I was safe, and I didn't feel like it would follow me if I kept running away. I never used subways again. I never found out what that thing was, nor do I ever want to. I still think about it every now and then. It never left my mind. It was always too real to be dismissed by my memory. It wasn't a dream, and it was not a nightmare. It was a terror far worse and beyond that. Even though it's been many years since then, I can still picture it. Its lifeless stare. I can see its eyes when I close my own. I can feel its presence when I'm alone. I can feel the emptiness, the quiet. I can't take it. I do many things today, and I try to forget the experience, but I don't think I ever really will. Was it responsible for the lights switching off? What exactly were its intentions? How did it make that noise? I fear I may never answer those questions, but at least I can give you this advice. This warning. Beware the Nightcrawler. That's what I decided to call it after a while. I thought it deserved to be recognized and have a proper name. Not that it's really all proper. In case that's what I picked. It carries the stench of death. It stares blankly as would a lifeless corpse. It stalks its prey, hiding in the shadows, the only source of light in the world of darkness. Eyes of ghostly yellow. It never blinks. It always watches. It may even still watch me to this day. And that thought will truly haunt me forever.